call the meeting of the Rules and Regs Committee to order, Mike. I already have a mic in the room right here. Let's call the December meeting of the Rules and Regs Committee to order, please. You're going to be so proud of me this month because I'm not going to forget to approve the minutes. Okay? So, could I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes from the October meeting? Mike?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the October Rules and Regulations meeting.
And do I see a nod of Jan's head? Okay, fabulous. Okay, so now, you know, you know, maybe in a couple of months I'll get this. Could we vote, please, on the minutes to approve the minutes? All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. Okay. I get so excited to get to the meat of the story. Today, because this particular piece that we're going through right now is so complicated and difficult, the important part is to make sure that everybody understands. We're going to do an overview today, kind of like we did for the beginning of the articles, okay? And then, as we go through the next few months, we'll dig deeper. But Doug, could you kind of give us a starting point for the act and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think last meeting we had a couple of months ago, October, we started talking about the Articles of Incorporation, and then we decided to give you guys some time to digest that a little bit more, and then come back today and talk some more about the Articles of Incorporation. But as you know, the POA is a 501c4 nonprofit corporation, and it was organized under the Arkansas Nonprofit Corporation Act of 1963. There were several amendments to that act, and after that, and of course the POA is currently under that designation and is in full compliance with the 63 Act and all of the amendments that were after that. There were new acts that were passed subsequent to the 63 Act, but the POA continues to be governed under that 1963 Act.
So effectively, we're grandfathered into the previous rules.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and so as we continue this discussion of the Articles of Incorporation, it's helpful to know that that's how the POA was organized, and it's currently existing under those laws. So I don't know, JB, if you want to go into the articles or if you want to go straight to the declaration.
Why don't you let's talk about the beginning note that you have that's probably very stressful for you to. Let's start with that, because that kind of says what it's all about,
yeah,
right?
So we're talking about the declaration here, and that's not sure what page of your packet that is on.
On the very first, well, I got the paper, sorry.
So we took a similar approach to what you saw in the Articles of Incorporation. In the Articles of Incorporation, we did what we call it the Cliff's Notes version of the Articles. We're not looking to change any of those things there, but we're trying to provide language that helps people understand what they actually say. And so if you look at the Articles of Incorporation, we've included several notes there that explain the different sections and the purpose for some of those. So when you're looking at the declaration in turn, it's a separate document, but the declaration, we took the same approach. That we've put in notes where we feel like there's some clarifying language or try to explain in simpler terms, okay, what exactly does that mean? And the other thing that we've tried to do, and Tom and the board gets questions all the time about, well, why can't we do this or why can't we do that? So there are instances in the declaration, in the notes, where we've said, this has come up over the years, this question, and this is the reason why. This section is the reason why we can't do X, Y, or Z. So we provide a note at the beginning of the declaration. We try to explain that. We say these notes are companion documents. They're not changes to the declaration because, as you know, those are almost impossible to change. But the note explains that the notes in red are just extra language that's added and is not meant to govern whatsoever the POA, just again notes for clarification purposes.
So I think when we were talking earlier, what people can look forward to is when we get through with this and it gets passed by the board, that note that's agreed upon will be in red or stands out from.
Correct.
How is that going to be?
Yep, that's exactly right. So as you see it in your packet today, we've got our notes outlined in red, and our intention is when it gets uploaded to the website that you'll see it exactly like that, so people can see that, okay, that's a note, it's in red, and that's quote-unquote extra language. It's not actual part of the declaration. It's just an interpretation that we've put in to help people out.
So it's not an upgrade, it's an update. It's a clarification. That's what all of this is. Okay, so would you like to, we'll get as far as we can.
Sure.
And then we've got plenty of time to do this, and we want to take our time. We don't want to rush through this.
Did anyone have any comments about the articles first? Kind of tacking back to that. We went over that in a little more detail at the last meeting that we had, and I don't think there were any questions, but just I think people wanted some time to read through it and just digest it a little bit.
Most of it was just clarification. I mean, it was just things that made something similar. So, right. Does anybody have any issues at all with those articles? And we made it all the way through there, correct?
Yeah. And so if you want to vote on that now, you can, or we can do it at the end of the meeting, whichever you prefer. But a vote from the committee to forward that on to the regular board for their consideration. It's up to you, JP.
So if we vote on it now, there's nothing later we're going to be talking about that will affect it. So we could go ahead and do the vote now.
Yeah.
Okay. Could I have a recommendation, to go ahead and vote on the Articles of Incorporation, unless you have more?
I'll make a motion to vote on the updated Articles of Incorporation.
And Mike is seconding it. Any more discussion at all? Everything pretty clear? Good job, you guys, really. Okay, could we, in that case, could we have
just one clarity point, Doug, on where this is located for those folks at home.
True.
Who wanted to look at this and understand where to find this on the website. Can we just reiterate again how to get to that area of the website?
Yeah, if you go to, it's on Member Resources tab on the POA website. Hopefully nothing
Crazy
bad comes up here. I've had that in the past.
You're taking a risk of doing that live.
Yes. So here's the homepage for the Bella Vista POA. Really nice, by the way. It's been updated, so that's kind of cool. If you click on this tab here, Member Resources, and then it will bring you to this section, and over here on the right, right here, Governance, Financial Reports, and Meetings. And then down here in Governing Documents, and this is where it will be listed here. You've got the articles, or the declaration, the articles, bylaws, policy, so it'll be listed under here under Articles of Incorporation. So a few steps to get there, but it's under Member Resources, and then it's fairly self-explanatory how to get there from there. Member Resources, and then Governance, which is, you hear Tom talk about the governing documents all the time. So Governance, and then Governing Documents. So that's where it'll be uploaded for all the members to review if they want to see and comment on the potential notes. I won't say updates, but notes.
Notes. Okay, so I think we have a motion to send this on to the regular POA board for a vote, correct? And no more discussion, we good?
Good.
All in favor? All opposed? Okay.
Awesome. So that goes on to the board, and then they'll take up that probably in today's GM meeting, I would imagine.
Okay.
So moving on to the declaration, you guys can all read, but I think this opening note is pretty important for people to understand, so I will go ahead and read it if you're okay with that. The
Yes.
Declaration and Protective Covenants in their original legal format can be challenging to read and understand. This document, meaning this one with the notes, is a compilation of the Declaration and Protective Covenants with notes added to make the documentation easier to understand. The Declaration and Protective Covenants in their original format are available on the POA's website and should be considered the official documentation. If there are any discrepancies between the original and the compilation, the original documents will govern. That's a required legal disclaimer there, have to have that in there. The attached notes are written with many years of perspective with the goal of making the Declaration and Protective Covenants easier to understand and more relatable, to the current environment of Bella Vista. The Declaration and Protective Covenants establishes the creation of the Bella Vista Property Owners Association, the Bella Vista Townhouse Association, and the Architectural Control Committee. In reviewing this document, it is important to differentiate the roles and responsibilities of each entity. Now you'll see one entity that's missing from that list. So what is that? It's the city, right? That's the other leg of the stool. The city's not mentioned there because it's not mentioned in the Declaration. As Mike says, as you're trying to look forward into the future, that was something that wasn't contemplated in 1965 when the Declaration was drafted. So it's kind of an interesting tidbit. And then an additional note, Cherokee Village Development Company, Inc., an Arkansas corporation referred to in this document is now Cooper Communities, Inc. And I was going to say the name of the POA, but we'll get to that later on in one of the other notes. Does anyone have any comments about that note? Or it's kind of a
clear?
general statement.
Okay.
May 18th, 1965 was the draft date.
And what a year it was.
It actually was.
And just about to be reborn again thanks to our new restaurant.
Yes.
BV65.
That's exactly.
Good marketing plug, Mike.
Well played.
So the first note there is similar to the last note of the page up top, but it's specific to that whereas clause. The next whereas clause, the note says, this paragraph outlines the creation of Bella Vista as an amenities-based community. So right from the very beginning, it was, the purpose of the POA was to provide amenities to the membership, and it's pretty clear from that very first statement there. And the next paragraph says, from this paragraph, it was clear from the onset the community would have an abundance of amenities for all ages. So I've listed out some of them there, the streets and roads, water system, lakes, golf courses, playgrounds, permanent parks, and other common facilities all make up the real property, which is its common property for the use of everyone, all members.
So they were thinking futuristically there, because there we were more of a retirement, right? And now we're only 33%, I believe, retirement.
That is true.
But to that, JB, I think we're on the next phase where people will be still, the homes that they've bought here, they'll look to live in their whole lives.
That's true.
So we will retire here.
The whole
Yeah, from start to end, right?
That was putting a pretty grave. It was gravely, start to end.
cradle to grave, is that what
Cradle
you
to
just
grave.
said?
That's basically what he just said.
That's the new tagline here at Bella Vista. We hadn't released it yet. You heard a little sneak peek here.
But seriously, like you said earlier, it had to be difficult back then to interpret and think about, oh my goodness, what could happen? I think they did a pretty good job, pretty good job. Okay.
The next whereas clause there on page 2, it says, note, in general terms, this paragraph is describing the purpose of the Bella Vista Property Owners Association. construction of facilities, preservation of the values and amenities in the community, maintaining and administering the common properties and facilities. So those are all roles that the POA, the Property Owners Association, plays. Next is, you'll see Bella Vista Country Club. That was the very first, very original name of the POA, which I don't know, I kind of like that better than POA, but
Yeah.
But that note says the Bella Vista Country Club first changed its name in 1973 and is now known as the Bella Vista Property Owners. It's actually legally called the Bella Vista Village Property Owners Association, but we've filed a doing business as filing with the Secretary of State. To now, we mostly just are known as Bella Vista Property Owners Association. We haven't gone through the formality of dropping village. We've kept it on in some of our documents, but a lot of ways we just go by Bella Vista POA or Bella Vista Property Owners Association.
And this was probably a good example of what Mike was talking about, where, you know, they looked at the reality at the time and said, okay, this is more than just a country club. There's a whole bigger picture here of a suite of amenities for people who own property in different ways and things like that. So
It is interesting as you read this that it started out with this golf course here, this country club. It was the Bella Vista Country Club, and that's what it was. And then they added a lake here and a lake there, and then another golf course and another golf course. So as the community got built out, it is really interesting to see how they provided for additional. They knew that they were going to make additional amenities and things for the membership. So they were able to foresee that a little bit.
Doug, do you know if any of this language came from the previous Cooper development or a piece of the Linebarger development, and it was combined to create this? Do we have any history on where the language was built from, or did a specific law firm create it for them?
Yep, they had legal counsel that created Cherokee Village first, which is another community in north central-ish Arkansas. So that was the first iteration that Cooper Communities had of a planned community like this. And so this document is largely based off of that. There are some small changes, but just as Hot Springs Village came a few years after our POA, their declaration is just a little bit different than ours. And one of those big differences is the assessments can be increased but based on cost of living, which that was a change that they made for Hot Springs, but we don't have in this one. So you're right, it was based off of that original one that was developed in Cherokee Village, and each community that Cooper did after that, they made little tweaks and changes to it.
Well, just to pull on that thread a little bit, you know, is obviously that's the number one driver behind the ability to do what we do here is the assessment. So it was pretty interesting to see that only a few years later, when they go to create Hot Springs, they had already realized kind of the error in a fixed assessment or one that would take a strong vote to change. You know, as just to remind everybody that's out there, you know, this is some of the challenges inherently that we go through compared to the other Cooper developments, is because we didn't have, if we would have been flopped with Hot Springs and came later, many things would change here, and including cost of living. And so I think we've been somewhat fortunate that it's been as low as it has been, but that's definitely put us behind the 8 ball in terms of keeping things up to par. No pun intended.
There you go for something. That's a good point. Okay, so now it says now therefore, we're on the now therefore clause. The note says the developer is making it clear that all real property described in the declaration plus property added later are subject to the covenants, restrictions, easements, charges, and liens established in this document. So as we'll see later, Cooper has the ability to add additional property to the POA, and it was meant that anything, and usually they'll, I'll hesitate to say always, but almost always a supplemental declaration is filed at the same time that property is, that Cooper wants to bring into the POA. They have to file a supplemental declaration, which makes this document applicable to that extra land as well. So we move on to Article 1. Section 1, this is the definitions under Section 1A, club. Club shall mean and refer to the Bella Vista Country Club. And so then the note says the terms club or the Bella Vista Country Club are interchangeable with the current legal name of Bella Vista Property Owners Association, or POA. The next section, Section B, is the properties. And the note says, properties that are subject to this declaration or any supplemental declaration are considered part of the POA. The phrase supplemental declaration means any additional properties which have been added to the POA after the drafting of the original document. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's still a little bit, people that hear supplemental declaration, that may not mean much to them, or declaration may not mean much to them. So kind of struggle with defining those terms.
Is that a little bit about property that is yet to receive utilities that Cooper is able to incorporate into the POA once water is established? Is that what they mean by additions? Or is this like new property like Arkmo was, or is this new property like how do we read that?
So not necessarily tied to utilities, but it could be. That could be a part of it. If, for example, we've had someone buy property from Cooper and they wanted to build a house there, and as part of that purchase price, they negotiate in the ability to bring that piece of property into the POA so that they can have access to water. So that person outside the POA, sorry, you don't have access to water, but Cooper may say, hey, I'm making an example here, but for a fee, we'll bring you into the POA. You have to pay assessments now. That's part of the deal, but you will have access to water. And some people like that deal, some people don't.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Doug, could that mean additional properties, we were in consideration of buying a piece of property up by Highlands Gate there, would that refer to that? If we were to purchase that, then it would be a part of that supplemental by definition?
So that particular piece that you're speaking of was already brought into the POA and was already a part of the POA. It was subject to assessment, and it was already had a supplemental declaration, so we would have purchased it and it would have already been in the POA. But you're right, if there's other property out there that is not.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And someone asked us that question, well why didn't you have to vote to sell Arkmo? Well, that hadn't been brought into the POA. That wasn't subject to the declaration, and so it was owned by the entity, the corporate entity POA, but it hadn't been brought in. And that was one of the things that, if you remember, to put a golf course up there, you would have had to have had water. So then, how do we get water? Do we go to Cooper and ask them to bring it in, or all of those questions? But that's all water under the bridge now that we've sold that. But that was a question that came up a lot. Yeah. Section 1C, common properties. So the note there says, the amenities within the POA are located on common property. For example, golf courses, lakes, parks, recreational areas, footways, fitness facilities, etc. With the founding of the city of Bella Vista in 2007, most of the roads and streets within Bella Vista were dedicated to the city of Bella Vista for ownership, maintenance, repair, and expansion. So that's an interesting point there, because we have people come to us and say, why isn't my road paved? And we say, well, that's the responsibility of the city now, and they don't like to hear that because they see in the declaration, oh, well, it says you have roads and streets. Well, this note is meant to clarify that now, the city, since the city's formation, that's their responsibility.
Doug, since we're in edit mode here, is footways, should we make that footways and trails, or?
That was something we haven't finalized, because we talked about what does footways mean.
And just another, for the sake of, dialing back the clock, Bella Vista one of its major attractions and amenities was horse trails.
Yes.
And that was the thing to do here. And so even now, many of the trails that are now dedicated to walking, hiking, and cycling are remnants of a lot of the old horse trails. And so and we don't currently allow horses any longer, or horsepower, but I'm wondering if there's even some language in here that still refers to some of that, or if that's what they meant by footways.
Yeah, let me make a note here, and I'll give that some more consideration. So your idea would be trails, and then what was the other word you used?
That's it. I mean, we just
Trail.
have footways listed, and I'm just wondering if that should just say trails.
Okay.
Instead.
Let me just make sure it doesn't conflict with other language, and then
Yeah.
we can bring that back. But that's a
Thank
good
you for bringing
suggestion.
that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments on that part? Common properties.
Just one more piece here. Does I know Sugar Creek is a federal waterway. Is there any mention of the access to the creek here as a part of the amenity base, or anything that the declaration takes into consideration in terms of that, which I think we can arguably call an amenity as well?
Yeah, there's no mention of streams or dam overflow or
Okay.
anything like that. That wasn't really contemplated in the declaration, so we haven't covered that here.
Okay.
One other little comment I was going to make is, the POA does have a budget for streets. Anyone know what that's for? I think you probably do. Quizzing you.
Parking lots, is that what you said?
There's some streets that are in the POA that are not in the city,
Right.
and the POA is responsible for keeping
Like
those
drives into our water towers, or drives into
The road up to.
right into the Reardon or something.
Up to the heights or whatever
There
it's
you go.
called, yeah.
So Bella Vista Heights
Well, heights.
did not get included in the city annexation. It's in the POA. Those lots are within the POA that pay assessments, but they weren't included in the city, and so this note doesn't really apply to them. That's the reason we still do have some money in our streets department, is to maintain those roads up there.
And there's a lot of changes going on up there, so we don't know in future what that might mean.
Yeah, that's a wait and see on that, because you're correct. There's a lot going on there behind the scenes that a lot of us
We
aren't
can't
aware
talk
of.
about yet.
Yeah, well, a lot of us aren't aware of.
Because we don't know.
I know.
What about the street or lane? that
Is your mic on?
by Kingsdale Clubhouse?
Is your mic on?
No.
What? Can you say that again?
What about the lane or is it Kingsdale Way that circles by the Kingsdale Clubhouse around the parking lot?
I do not believe that has been dedicated public right of way. I think it's still private,
I know there's been
privately owned by the POA.
requests to fix that road.
But there is, are you talking about the road that goes back, like between the tennis
From
courts?
Reardon Road all the way down, circles around the clubhouse, can go by
To the
the
new-
tennis, right in front of the BV Rec.
Yeah, I don't believe that's public right of way. I think it's private.
It's private.
Mm-hmm,
So that's the street that we would,
correct. There is a street that goes back to that little, it's not the greens, what is that called back there?
trails or something like that.
The greens?
You go past the tennis courts and in between like the clubhouse,
the-
I mean,
It's apartments now.
yeah.
It's called trails or
Trail,
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So that portion of the road would be, I believe, private as well. But I'm not sure who maintains that, because
Our responsibility
it's
as
a good
POA is extremely limited.
Yeah.
The nuts and bolts. of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
very, very little. Next note says,
Fourth revised map.
so this one is kind of hard to understand. Tom and I went back and forth on this before we settled on this language, but the note says the fourth revised map, which is referenced in the declaration, the fourth revised map included areas either formerly or commonly known as Old Bella Vista, Sunset Hotel, and the Heights. everyone note with me on that, where those three locations are, the heights. So in 1965, some of the locations covered by the fourth revised map had amenities already in place. That Bella Vista Lake, I believe, was part of that. The amenities which were in place at that time did not become common property and are not part of the POA. The Declaration and Protective Covenants is a forward-looking document whereby future amenities developed by the developer after May of 1965 would become common property and part of the POA. There are only a few amenities covered under the fourth revised map that predate May 1965 and still exist. Lake Bella Vista predates May 1965 and is owned and maintained by the city of Bentonville.
Right.
So that fourth revised map was made in, I think, like 1911, and I think it was done by the Linebargers.
Oh, my
And it
goodness.
was when the very original, when they set it up as a resort community, that fourth revised map divvied up some lots and then had some common property in there that didn't, and it's specific here, it says it does not cover those amenities in the fourth revised map, so.
You know, it might be fun to go by the historical
Well, I was
museum
just getting ready to say
and,
the same
and
thing.
see,
Yeah.
because they have all this really cool history.
Some cool pictures over there. too.
Oh, yeah, 1911.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to have it on the record, I would love to task the marketing team to work with the Bella Vista Historical Society to do some overlay maps that kind of shows where we've come from, where we're at. I think the membership would get a kick out of seeing the progression of the village.
And along with that, I have wanted so many times, because there are pockets that are both city and POA, and then there's county, and I would love to have like a basic layer and then add a layer of what's the city, and then add a layer of what's, just so people understand, so I can understand. Exactly, you know, the overlays that I'm talking about, you can do it electronically now even. That's a big undertaking, but necessary.
Well, it's true, isn't it, that there are areas that are under the city of Bella Vista
Yes.
that are not
Yes.
under the POA?
Yes,
There's county holdouts.
and there's county
and
holdouts
yeah.
too. Now, that area, Robin Road, know that, is
Robin.
that?
I was gonna say Cardinal Road, but I knew that wasn't the name.
Yeah.
It was in the bird family, though.
Yeah, but it's right there in the Highlands, it's kind of in the middle of everything, and is that county?
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's not the Highlands.
Well, I'm talking about the Highlands
Gate.
gate, and it's around the curve there, and it's blah, blah, blah.
It's back this side, yeah.
It is, but
General
still,
vicinity.
it's in that vicinity, and I've always thought, that's weird, that it's just right there in the middle of everything.
Mhm. Yep, that's not POA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not city either.
Yeah, so it would be county then.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was. I didn't know. I thought it was in the city, but if it's not city, it's county.
Have you driven up there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. No further comments. Anyway,
All right. So the next section is the definition is limited common properties, and you see that throughout the declaration, but it's really I don't want to say it doesn't apply, but let's read the note. How about that?
yeah,
Most of the limited common properties are located in areas controlled by the Bella Vista Townhouse Association, which are considered specifically designated areas. The use and enjoyment of amenities located in the Bella Vista Townhouse Association are limited to the lot and living unit owners of the Townhouse Association. Thus, they're called limited. Individuals are encouraged to review the governing documents of the Bella Vista Townhouse Association. So they pay a separate assessment, and they have access to other limited common properties, and they get some other benefits for their separate assessment, but they pay two assessments. They pay a POA assessment, and they pay a townhouse assessment.
Doug is an example of that, one of the common docks that the Townhouse Association gets use of.
Correct. And they used to have a couple of pools, I think, and some tennis courts that were specific only to townhouse residents, and I think some of those have been
filled in.
filled in or raised
Whatever.
over because, yeah. Yeah,
So really, they're for
yeah.
government.
There's another leg to that stool. Yep.
Now this is more stable.
That's right, exactly. We can move to a table now.
Yes.
Four-legged table. Roads and streets is the next one. The note says, with the founding of the city of Bella Vista in 2007, most of the roads and streets within Bella Vista were dedicated to the city of Bella Vista for maintenance, repair, and expansion. In a few isolated instances, the POA still owns and maintains certain roads and streets.
And a little portion about the incorporation of the city had to do with some bond money, or can you give the listeners a little bit of history of why it incorporated? And I thought it had to do with some highway money, federal money.
Yeah, that's the explanation I've been given to. Or one of the reasons for incorporating the city was that they were unable to get, when the POA did the roads and streets, they were unable to take advantage of tax money.
Yes, exactly.
Because it was a private entity. And so by incorporating the city, then they become eligible, and it's a city of the first, I don't remember the term, but they have access to those funds then. And so, when the POA prior to that was really strapped for money to try to keep the roads and streets improved and maintained, then to have that tax revenue was a huge boon.
And the city's still pretty much strapped because there's so many roads here. There are more roads here in Bella Vista than there are roads in Little Rock. So anyway,
Lots of miles of roads to keep and maintain.
lots of miles of roads. Yes.
So the next definitions, many of the following definitions are self-explanatory, requiring no further commentary. Unless any of you want to comment now, Jason.
Perfect.
Go for it.
No, I would agree.
So the last one under that section is associate member. Note there are few, if any, associate members remaining. Associate members were more common in the early developmental years of Bella Vista. And that would just happen if Cooper would sell a lot on contract to someone. They weren't technically an owner yet because they weren't an owner. They were buying it, but they didn't own it, so they were considered associate members. But Cooper's
Was
not
there
really
also a
the same way.
timeshare element here that would basically make you an associate member as well if you were entered into a cooperative purchase? Or
Yep, that's right. There's
Wasn't that what the
timeshares.
Greens
The Greens 1 and 2 was all timeshares, and I'm not sure if there may be still a few stragglers left in there that do timeshares, but for the most part, they've disbanded and converted to regular housing units. But that's right.
So in the essence of time, maybe we can
Yes.
just do Article 2, because I think it's fairly
Okay.
short, and then cut off there for today. Okay?
All right. Article 2, track number 1. Let's see. Note the lots and tracks listed below are the original properties comprising the POA. Additional property has been added to the POA through various supplemental declarations. One must review the supplemental declarations to gain a complete understanding of the lots and tracts which have been added since the creation of the POA. So all of these lots listed here are all the original lots that made up the POA. And then as Cooper built out subdivisions and made additional lots, then those subdivisions were brought in via supplemental declaration. And so if you do title searches on those lots, you'll see that that's how they were made a part of the POA. Section 2, note, the developer, its successors and assigns shall have the right to add additional properties to the POA. This is a declarative right, or is provided in the declaration, owned by the developer, which gives them the unilateral authority to expand the POA at any time. Any properties added to the POA would be subject to assessments.
When is the last time something was added?
would that be
Really?
the trail side?
Yep. Well, they just added a new subdivision up here on, is that 340 or 279? That was reserve property. It was reserve property, but they subdivided it, and now it's called the Trail Subdivision, I think
And
is what
that's
it's called.
going toward Walmart?
Yes.
Where they widened the road?
Yep, by Scottsdale Golf Course. Well,
No, that's still Cooper. Oh, 279, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
what's that?
Yeah, I know what
Makes
you
sense.
mean, but there's another
what's
one
that
that
one?
Cooper still owns that is not part of.
Oh,
Yeah.
by Gordon Hollow.
Yeah,
Those have not been added yet, but they will be. But that's an example, exactly
Okay.
right. Yep, that's an example of them developing additional property, creating lots, and then When they sell them, they then become subject to assessments. And
When they sell them individually, or they sell them all?
Whichever.
Okay,
Sometimes they sell individual lots, but in this case, I think they sold 19 in the first phase, and they're going to sell the other 19 in the second phase.
oh,
And so
okay, okay. So we need more amenities, folks. No, I'm just kidding.
it's now public record, so I can divulge that
Gotcha,
information.
okay.
Doug, if the developer, in this case Cooper, were to either sell the development company or go out of business, do either one of those two things trigger anything here?
That's a good question. Just so you're aware, I wouldn't say trigger necessarily, but they can sell their rights under the declaration to a willing purchaser, and then that person would step in and be the new Cooper.
So nothing
would-
changes there, we just have a different
Correct.
person governing.
We'd be working with a different developer. The developer would assume a new name, and they would have all these same rights.
Okay,
B, note this paragraph describes the filing requirements for a supplemental declaration for adding additional properties to the POA. Section C, note the developer could establish complementary regulations through a supplementary declaration, provided these regulations are not contradictory to those established through the declaration. So we've given an example here, and Tom and I discussed this one at length too, he's like, what does this mean? Why do they have this in here? And it's essentially to say that a later supplemental declaration can't trump a subdivision that's already been brought under the declaration.
okay,
So in a supplemental declaration for the trails, for instance, they have a larger square foot requirement than what any other subdivision in the POA has. So when they brought the trail subdivision in via supplemental declaration, they couldn't then say in that, oh, and by the way, we want Shetland subdivision now to be subject to these same requirements. You can't, once Shetland subdivision is brought in, they're subject to those requirements. You can't then in a later declaration, supplemental declaration, impose additional requirements on them. So that's what that means. Little hard to understand, but that's it. So section 3, the note says, this section further clarifies that only the developer, its successors and assigns, meaning if they sell that right to someone else, shall have the declarative right to add additional lands and properties to the POA. Written notice to the POA is required of the addition of lands and properties. So Cooper comes to us and says, hey, we're bringing this in, and we sign the plat and all of that stuff, but just reiterates that that's there. So if we wanted to add ARCMO, we couldn't do it
yeah,
on our own. We would have to go to Cooper, and they would have to,
okay.
we'd have to go to the developer, and they would sign off on it. Any questions on section 2?
That's an awful lot to digest, so like we said, let's start next time on Article 3, and it'll give us a little more time to reread that, and great work.
Yeah.
But, this is, you never want to look at anything once, several times, because things
Can you honestly say this is the joy of the job?
I was just going to say, I love talking about this stuff, which is kind of crazy, but it is difficult to read, but at the end of the day, I love talking about it, so I guess I'm weird.
No, you're just an attorney.
Yeah.
What
You're just Doug.
what you've done, the little red notes help you so much to understand the legalese, as we call it. Oh, that's what it means. Okay, I see it now. But to put it in just plain
Layman terms.
English and make it easy to understand, and the Cliff's Notes version, as you call it, it's
Jan in particular can relate to this, and anybody else that's ever been a teacher. If you want to learn something, you need to teach it. And you knew a lot to begin with, but now you know a whole lot more.
Or give it to Doug, let him put red notes.
Yeah, there you go. Turn it over to the attorney. Okay, is there anything else we need to talk about? Because we're getting ready to, we've just got a few minutes, but let's.
I know you will, but as you read through these and you have comments or you have suggestions for other maybe clarifying notes that you'd like to see, we're happy we're happy to add those.
I just got one more thing just for the record here. What's incredible is we're looking at a plan, right? This is a planned community. We're experiencing a pretty extreme growth in the region and definitely in the city. And we've gone ahead and moved into new flavors of language called urban planning. And at the
Yes.
time, this was basically rural planning or resort planning in a rural area. And POA has a major role in continuing to stay up to speed on urban planning, what that means, how it affects people. And so I look forward to, as the rules and regulations continue to like figure out what's going on. We may create a subboard at some point in time, just like another JAC committee that keeps up to date on planning. You know, not just leave that to the city, because we play such an important role that we can't just leave that up to the city. And we see that a little bit in our amenities, whether we're upgrading to more playgrounds versus more adult-only activities, or, you know, things that are more all ages, or even the incorporation of dog parks, which would be a rather new flavor for rural communities at the time. That's truly an urban planning thing. Just something that hits me here as we continue to plan this community. And I would like to see how we continue our education here at the POA to stay up to date on what's happening trend-wise, but also to be ahead of tip of the spear.
Well, I'll share this with you because it's already kind of in place. So the city has incorporated or has hired a consultant who's really good at, I mean, the city's covenants and ordinances and regulations were kind of at the last minute, like, oh my goodness, we gotta hurry up and get this done. So there's a big push, big study going on that will take 18 months right now. There already is a subgroup of important people in the community. I believe Tom might even be part of that committee. The ACC's part of that committee. So they've already kind of started that, so you're right. But over the next 18, and there'll be meetings throughout the next 18 months all about this.
There's public input already.
Totally. Yes, there's a place right now you can actually go out and say, here's how I feel about blah, 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 blah. So it's an educational process. It's going to take 18 months. It's going to be almost as painful as doing this. But I'm really proud of where we are and our role in it. And go Bella Vista. All right, any other questions? Any other comments? Let's adjourn.